Hello everyone and welcome to video 4. So last time we looked at what the cell membrane was made up of. So for the starter activity we have two Viscount tubing experiments set up. One contains starch solution and one contains glucose solution. And what we're getting asked is what will this experiment show? So you can pause the video and write down what you think will happen. Now before we start this tutorial, if you want to print off any of the worksheets, then you'll have to go into your cell biology folder in Teams, and then you'll have to go into the second one, which is transport, and then you'll have to go into your consumables, and then you'll have to go into 2.2, which is diffusion. Then you can print out all of the consumable worksheets, and then if you go back to your cell biology and transport, you can then go into PowerPoint and go to the second one, which is diffusion. So the answer to this experiment question is that after 10 minutes glucose would be detected on the outside and starch would not be detected on the outside. And that's because if you remember, your Viscount tubing was made out of your little pores, and each of these little pores was like a little hole, and glucose was small enough to get through, whereas starch was too big to get through. So glucose would be inside the Viscount tubing and outside, and starch would only be found inside the Viscount tubing as it was too big, and the Viscount tubing is selectively permeable like the cell membrane. Now, cell membranes are found in all cells and they were made up of proteins, which were your channels, which provided these little holes, and phospholipids. So if you can't remember that or you're struggling with that, then you need to go back and watch video 3. So today we're going to learn how to compare passive and active transport and what they both are. We need to be able to describe what the concentration gradient is and how it affects transport. We need to be able to define diffusion and explain the importance of diffusion in gas exchange. So to be successful, you will have written down a note on transport. You will answer the questions on diffusion. You'll be able to label diagrams on the importance of gas exchange, and you'll be able to stand and deliver, so basically stand and talk about what diffusion is and why it is important. So what you would do if you were in class is you would write the title transport and then you would make that note into your jars. So there are 3 different types of transport that you need to know. Obviously transport is important because we need useful things into our cells like oxygen and glucose, or we wouldn't be able to survive, we wouldn't have energy. And we need to get rid of harmful things like carbon dioxide, which if it builds up, it would be toxic. So your substances can move across your membrane by your 3 different methods. So you've got diffusion, which is passive transport, and no energy is needed. You've got osmosis, which is passive transport, no energy needed. And then you have the third one, which is active transport, and energy is needed for that one. So you've got your 2 passive transports and your 1 active transport. Now, active usually means that you're energetic and you can do lots of exercise, so energy is needed for that. So that is how you remember that active transport requires energy. The other 2, which are diffusion and osmosis, do not. Now we'll go into explaining what these 3 different transports are in more detail in a minute. So for all 3 transport methods to occur, there needs to be something called a concentration gradient. So a concentration gradient, like anything, is kind of like a little slope, okay? So basically you have to have a high part and a lower part, or you won't have a concentration gradient. And if there isn't a concentration gradient, then the transport process cannot occur. Your concentration gradient is your high gradient, take away your lowest gradient. So you'd write the note that the concentration gradient is the difference in concentration that exists between an area of high concentration and low concentration. So you've got your high concentration here and you've got your low concentration there, and it's just like a hill, so like any gradient. So you can imagine a ball rolling down it from the high concentration to the low concentration, or you can imagine somebody on their bike going down a hill. So molecules act like either little balls or little bikes in this case when it's referring to a concentration gradient. So in the same way that a ball rolls down a hill faster if there is a steep gradient, so that just means like a steep hill, the movement of molecules occurs faster if there is a greater difference in concentration. So as you can see from this one where there's a great difference from the high to the low concentration, the ball would be expected to go faster in that case than in this other case where there's a short gradient and a short hill where the high gradient is nearer the lower gradient. So we should expect to see the ball rolling down the steeper hill faster. In the last slide, we've seen that if you increase the gradient, you increase the speed at what the molecules could move. If there is no concentration gradient, because the concentrations are equal, then there will be no net movement of molecules. So what that means is molecules still move, but there's no net movement. So there's no remarkable difference on either side, so it stays balanced. So as molecules are coming in, they'll be going out. There's a balance act. Okay, so if there's no concentration gradient, there's no net movement of molecules. So then we would write the title of passive transport, and we're going to go into that into more detail. So at the start, we said that there was two transport methods that came under this heading, which were diffusion and osmosis. So passive transport was the one that didn't require energy, okay? So it's the simplest form of transporting substances, and it has to have a difference in concentration for a concentration gradient to be produced for passive transport to take place. And passive transport does not require any energy as the movement is from high to low, so it's going down the way. So high to low always means going down the way. So for example, if you were riding a bike and you got to a steep hill, you wouldn't really need to pedal, you wouldn't need to put in any energy. So that's how you can remember it. So if you remember a person on a hill, because it's going from high to low, and then they wouldn't have to do anything, they just go straight down the hill if it was steep enough. So it does not require energy. So we're going to look at the process of diffusion in more detail. So diffusion is where molecules of liquids and gases move freely at all times. So for example, if your guardian was cooking bacon or cooking something, the smell would travel from the room that they were in to all the different rooms in the house, starting with the one that's closest to wherever they're cooking. And that's because the smell is moving from the high concentration where it's being cooked in the pan to the low concentration in the other rooms. So if you get asked what is diffusion, the answer that you need to be able to come up with and reproduce is that diffusion is the movement of molecules from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration down a concentration gradient, and it is passive, it does not require energy. You need to be able to say that, you need to be able to write it out many, many times. Okay, so that is what you say if you get asked what diffusion is. Usually I'd go around the class and make sure everybody could say it and embarrass you all. So you need to know that diffusion is the movement of molecules from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration down the concentration gradient. It is passive and doesn't require energy. Remember that you need to add the word molecules in there. So if you pause the video and you write down diffusion and you write down that definition before we move on. So as you saw, them red blood cells were highly concentrated at the bottom, and then they moved to the low concentration. So they moved from a region of high concentration to an area of low concentration, which would have been the process of diffusion. So an easy way to remember diffusion is to imagine somebody going down a hill. So you're going from your area of high concentration, which is at the top of the hill, to the area of low concentration. And remember, it's going to be a steep hill, so you're not going to need to put in any energy. So there's no energy required because you do not need to pedal that bike if you're going down the hill. So diffusion begins with a D, down begins with a D. So you're moving from your high region of concentration to your low region of concentration, down the concentration gradient, and it's passive, it's not requiring any energy, any pedaling. So why do we care about diffusion? So diffusion is very important because living cells depend on diffusion for the uptake and loss of substances. So without diffusion, we would not be alive. So these substances must be dissolved in water, and substances which can diffuse across the cell membrane include oxygen, carbon dioxide, dissolved food, so for example glucose and amino acids, and water. So we have a cell here, it's an animal cell because it's got its cell membrane on the outside. So what does this cell need for it to survive? So what do we need to take into this cell? So cells need to gain substances from the blood. What do we think these substances are? So it would be oxygen, because we need it for respiration, and glucose, which we also need for respiration to make energy so that we can do anything. So we've said what substances need to get into the cell, but what substances need to get out of the cell? So what do we need to get rid of? What's going to be harmful and toxic to our cells? So cells need to get rid of substances back into the blood. So these are carbon dioxide and waste. So we want them to go back so that they can get out of the blood by the lung. So what we would do now is we would put importance of diffusion into our notes and we'd stick in the diagram. And then you would add what substances are going into the cell and what substances are going out of the cell. You're going to write a little sentence about why diffusion is important in gas exchange, and it says diffusion is a passive process. What does this mean? So you might want to do this and make notes by yourself, and then I will reveal the answer to you. So if you want to do that just now, pause the video. So the answers would be that oxygen and glucose are going into the cell, and we want carbon dioxide and waste coming out of the cell. The next answer would be that diffusion is important in gas exchange as it allows oxygen into the cell and it allows us to get rid of carbon dioxide out of the cell and allows us to remove the carbon dioxide. And diffusion is a passive process as it does not require any energy. So that would be your three answers. Well done if you got them correct. So this shows the importance of diffusion in unicellular organisms. So in the first video, we said that unicellular organisms were organisms that were only of one cell. So diffusion is important for them because they need oxygen to come into the cell so that they can function. So your oxygen is going to move from a high concentration on the outside of the cell to the low concentration on the inside of the cell. So you see that with the blue arrow. At the same time, carbon dioxide needs to go out of the cell because it's toxic. So your carbon dioxide moves from the high concentration inside the cell to the low concentration outside of the cell. So that's the way that the unicellular organism can perform gas exchange. So in your multicellular organisms, it is a bit more complex. So this is an air sac in humans. So obviously from third and second year, you should know that you have your trachea or your windpipe, which then splits into your bronchus, that then goes into your bronchioles, which then has your air sacs at the bottom, and your air sacs, which are called your alveoli, and your alveoli run really close to your capillaries, which transport your blood. So the capillary is one cell thick, so it allows rapid diffusion of gases. So you can see the key at the bottom here, which tells us that carbon dioxide molecules are black and white, whereas your oxygen molecules are your two white blobs. Your red blood cells are your red dots that are going through. So the air sac has a layer of moisture to allow gases to dissolve. So that is the blue lining that lines your air sac. So the carbon dioxide is in high concentration in the capillary, so it moves into the air sac. So you have your high concentration of your carbon dioxide in your blood cells, in your capillary, and your low concentration, so your low concentration of your carbon dioxide in your air sac. So it's moving from the high concentration in the red blood cells to the low concentration, and then your carbon dioxide will be expelled from your lungs. The oxygen is different, so it's the reverse. So let's put that in purple. So the oxygen is in a higher concentration in the alveoli or the air sac. So your oxygen is here. So it's got high concentration because it's just coming from the air. And your low concentration is going to be in the capillary. So it's going to move from the high concentration in the alveoli to the low concentration in the capillary and the red blood cells. And then the red blood cells can then transport it to the tissues. So we've arrived at body cells. This might be a muscle cell, it could be an eye cell. So our capillary is running right beside our body cell. Now, our body cell needs oxygen and it needs to get rid of the carbon dioxide that it's produced so it doesn't become toxic. So again, the capillary cell is one cell thick to allow for rapid diffusion. So the carbon dioxide is produced in the cell, so there's a high concentration. So we've got our high concentration of carbon dioxide this time in the body cell, and we've got our low concentration in the capillaries. So the carbon dioxide is going to move from the high concentration in the body cell to the low concentration outside, well, in the capillaries, outside of the body cell. Whereas the oxygen has been used up by the body cells, so there's a low concentration of oxygen in the body cells, and there is a high concentration of oxygen in the capillary because it's just come from the lungs. So your oxygen is going to move from your high concentration in the capillary to your low concentration in the body cell so that it can have oxygen to perform respiration. So the blood arriving has a high concentration of oxygen and a low concentration of carbon dioxide, which we just said. So oxygen diffuses into the cell and carbon dioxide diffuses out of the cell. So to summarise that, we would print out the little alveoli with the capillary and stick it into our jars. So we could add labels to that. So you've got your capillary, you've got your air sac or your alveoli, and you've got your film of moisture and your blood. You've got your oxygen entering your blood by diffusion, and you've got your carbon dioxide leaving the blood by diffusion. Now, sometimes the SQA will put in a question of where is the lowest concentration of oxygen. Now, the lowest concentration of oxygen will be at point A because the oxygen will have been used up by the body cells because that's it coming back to the lungs, so coming back to the capillary that's at the lungs. So it'll be used up by all of the body cells and then it'll have made its way back to the lungs. So your highest concentration of oxygen will be at the letter B, and this is because your red blood cells have had a chance to travel throughout the lungs, collecting all of the oxygen that they need to then take it back to the body cells. Now, your highest concentration of carbon dioxide will be at A, and that's because your body cells will have given all of the carbon dioxide to your blood so that it can be released and exported back into the air. So your lowest concentration of carbon dioxide will be at B, and that's because your carbon dioxide will have diffused and left the lungs. So this is a question from an exam paper, so you can pause the video and try to answer it yourself first. So the diagram below shows an alveolus or air sac and its associated blood capillary. As the blood flows from X to Y, gases are exchanged with the alveolus. Which line in the table below identifies the concentration of gases at X and Y? So to answer these questions, you have to start off with the first part. So you'd start off with the X. So is X going to be a high concentration of oxygen or a low concentration of oxygen? So we know that the body cells will have used up the oxygen and will have given the red, like the blood, carbon dioxide to take back to the lungs. So it's going to be a low concentration of oxygen. So it's got to be that one or that one. Now to get the answer, we then need to figure out what Y is. The concentration at Y. So is it going to be a high carbon dioxide concentration or a low carbon dioxide concentration? So obviously this is going to go through and go to Y. So we're going to be losing carbon dioxide to the lungs. So we're going to end up having a low concentration of carbon dioxide because our carbon dioxide is going to move from the high concentration as it's just being collected from the body cells to the low concentration in the lungs, and it's going to travel out the way. So the answer is going to be C. So just a reminder of what happens when your blood and your capillaries meet your body cells. So your blood in your capillaries has a high oxygen concentration because it's just been oxidized by the lungs. So your oxygen is going to diffuse from the high concentration in the red blood cells in the blood to the low concentration of oxygen in the body cells so the body cells can carry out respiration. So that is by the process of diffusion. And then the other gas that's exchanged is carbon dioxide. So your body cells all produce the waste gas carbon dioxide, and we don't want it to stay in the cells or it could be toxic. So your high levels of carbon dioxide concentration are then moved to your low carbon dioxide concentration in the blood, and that is also by the process of diffusion. So now you should be able to do 2 tasks. So you should be able to do 3, which is your diffusion in humans, and you should be able to do 4A, which is your gas exchange question. So if you go into your consumable folders, in your transport, in your cell biology folder, then you should be able to find 3 and 4A. So if you do them worksheets and pause the video just now, and then I will reveal the answers to you. Okay, so the answers are, so if we start at our air sac, our alveoli in our lungs, so we've got our bronchiole and then we've got our air sac, so where it meets our capillary. So we know that when we breathe in our air, we've got a high concentration of oxygen in it and a low concentration of carbon dioxide. So our high concentration of oxygen is going to go to our low concentration of oxygen in our blood. So that is going to be by the process of diffusion. We've got diffusion of oxygen, and then we're going to have our red blood cells moving our oxygen all the way past any of our body tissues or body cells. Our blood is going to be rich in oxygen. So at this point, we're going to have diffusion of oxygen into our body cell because you're going to have your high concentration of oxygen in the red blood cell and you're going to have your low concentration of oxygen in the body cell. So the tissues are then, or the body cells are going to make carbon dioxide, which is a waste gas. So you're going to get high concentrations of carbon dioxide. and you're going to have your low concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood. So you're going to have your diffusion of carbon dioxide from the high concentration in the body cell to the low concentration in the blood. So then the blood is going to get transported back to the lungs. So your blood's going to be rich in carbon dioxide now. And then when we get to the lungs, we're going to have the diffusion of carbon dioxide from the buildup that we've got from our body cells, and it's going to go into the lungs, and then we're going to breathe it out. We're going to exhale it. And then we start all over again. So you're going to breathe in, you're going to get your high concentration of oxygen, your blood cells will take it to the body cells, your oxygen will get put into the body cells, your carbon dioxide will get removed from the body cells, and then your carbon dioxide will get removed from the lungs, your oxygen will come into the lungs, and so forth. So this is where the questions start to get slightly trickier. So this is taken from a past paper. So it says the diagram shows a site of gas exchange in the lungs, and then it's got the table shows the relative concentrations of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water in 3 cell types. So you've got your red blood cell, your cell of your capillary wall, and your cell of your alveolus wall, which are your different cell types. And then you've got your oxygen, your carbon dioxide, and your water. So for AI, it says describe the pathway that oxygen would take when moving between these cell types. Now, a describe question is very common in biology, and describe basically means that you don't have to answer why, you're just saying what happens and what you see. So you don't have to look for a reason behind it. So describe questions are different, so you need to make sure you know the difference between a describe question and an explain question. So for this question that says describe the pathway that oxygen would take, we want to look at what we're looking at first of all is what molecule. So we're looking at oxygen, and then it says describe the pathway that oxygen would take when moving between these cell types. So all we want to say is that oxygen would move from the cell of alveolus wall to the cell of the capillary wall to the red blood cell. So it's moving from your alveolus cell wall to your capillary wall, then to your red blood cell. And that's all you would need to put for that answer. Okay, for the next question, it's an explain question, so it's asking why. So explain why oxygen moves along this path. So the answer for that would basically be the definition of diffusion. So we would want to write that oxygen moves from a higher concentration to a lower concentration down a concentration gradient by diffusion for our marks. Okay, so explain means reason behind it, describe is just what you see. So explain why oxygen moves along this pathway would be that oxygen moves from a higher concentration to a lower concentration down a concentration gradient by the process of diffusion. So then it says for B, osmosis would not occur between the cells of the capillary wall and the cells of the alveolus wall. Using the information provided, explain why this is not the case. So we know that the information must be somewhere in this page because it says use the information provided. So if we have a look, because we're talking about osmosis, it's going to be water, which we need to go into more detail in the next video. So water, what would be the common feature of water which means that it would not be able to happen? Okay, so the answer would be there is no concentration gradient or there is no difference in concentration because all of the water is at medium. So its relative concentration is all at medium. So all you need to put for your answer is that there is no concentration gradient. So what we're going to do now is we're going to compare our diffusion in our animal cell to our diffusion in our plant cell, which are slightly different. So we know that animal cells need to take in water and also remove water rapidly. We also know that they need to take in oxygen for respiration and glucose for respiration. Now we know that oxygen can come through the cell membrane rapidly because it's a gas, and glucose will take a little bit more time because it needs to go through the protein channels. It can't just go through the little spaces, because obviously your cell membrane is selectively permeable and it's made up of your protein channels, and it's also made up of your phospholipids. Another thing that comes into the animal cell is amino acids, and the gas that's a waste product that has to get out of the cell is carbon dioxide. So amino acids, they're like glucose, so they'll come in slowly. Carbon dioxide's a gas, so it can just diffuse rapidly like oxygen. And your animal cells will make proteins. Now proteins are too big, they can't fit through the cell membrane. So this is just a summary of what I have just said. So the diffusion of water occurs rapidly in and out of the cell. The diffusion of small molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide occur rapidly. The diffusion of larger dissolved food molecules like glucose and amino acids occur more slowly. And large molecules like protein cannot pass through the cell membrane, so do not diffuse. So plant cells, like animal cells, need to perform gas exchange because they need to perform respiration, but they also need to do the process of photosynthesis. So plants, unlike animal cells, they need to take in carbon dioxide and they need to give out oxygen. So if we look at our plant cell now, so diffusion in the green leaf cell in the light, so the diffusion of water occurs rapidly in and out of the cell just like the animal cell. The diffusion of small molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide occur rapidly, but this time you'll see the carbon dioxide's coming in and the oxygen's going out because of photosynthesis. Then the diffusion of larger dissolved food molecules like glucose occurs more slowly, and large molecules like starch and cell proteins cannot pass through the cell membrane because they're too big, so they cannot diffuse. So it's similar to an animal cell, but a little bit different because the oxygen and carbon dioxide are the other way around, because plants need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. So to summarize, your amino acids and your glucose are going to go into your animal cell. They're going to be quite slow because they have to go through the protein channel. Your carbon dioxide is going to go out of your cell and it's going to be super rapid. Your oxygen is going to come in because they can just get through the little gaps. Your water is going to go in and out of the cell, and your proteins are not going to be able to come in or go out of the cell because it's too big. For your green plant cell, your glucose is going to be able to go out of the cell, but it's going to be quite slow. Your oxygen is going to go out of the cell rapidly. Your carbon dioxide will come into the cell rapidly. Your water will go in and out of the cell. But your protein and your starch, they'll be too big, so they will not be able to diffuse. So now you know the differences between your plant and your animal cells, exchanges of gases and diffusion. Another question that is seen quite a lot in past papers is where you get diagrams. So in the diagrams below, the circles represent the molecules on either side of a cell membrane. In which of these diagrams would the molecules move into the cell by diffusion? So for this, you have to look at the numbers on the outside and on the inside. So for example, this one has 1, 2, 3, 4 cells on the outside, and it has 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 cells on the inside. So this is going to be the high concentration, and this is going to be the low concentration. For this one, this is going to have the low concentration on the inside, and the outside is going to be the high concentration because it's got more little dots. This one's going to have the low concentration on the outside, and this one's going to have the high concentration on the inside. And these ones, I think, are even. So what we're getting asked is we need to now pay attention to whether it's going outside or in, because we know diffusion is from high to low. So the movement of molecules from a high concentration to a low concentration down a concentration gradient. So what diagram represents the molecules moving into a cell by diffusion? So we want to go into, so that would be going outward. This would be going into, so the answer would be D. So now what you should be able to do is you should be able to stand up and say the definition of diffusion off by heart and the importance of diffusion for cells. So make sure you're able to do that before you move on to the next video, and this is quite a complex set of slides and a complex video, so you might need to watch it more than once to try to understand what has been said. So what you should have been able to do, so pause the video if you're doing your stand and deliver now, and then I will give you the answers. So the answers are that diffusion is the movement of molecules from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration down a concentration gradient. It is passive, so it doesn't require energy. And diffusion is important for gas exchange, so oxygen coming into the cells and carbon dioxide going out of the cells when we're talking about humans. So to make sure that you're successful, you need to be able to name the three methods of transporting substances across a cell membrane. So if you can't remember, that's diffusion, active transport, and osmosis. That you need to be able to know that diffusion is the movement of substances or molecules from a high concentration to a low concentration down a concentration gradient. You need to know that it's important in gas exchange. You need to know that it happens without using energy, so it's a passive process. So if you have managed to know all of that, well done, and that is the end of the video. Woohoo! Remember, you can go back and watch it as many times as you like. Okay, thank you.